I'd like to invite Sri Amit Sharma, ADG and Advisor Cyber, Minister of Defense, Government of India, to deliver his key speaker address. A huge round of applause for him, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I must express my gratitude to the organizers for this profound conference, and most importantly, the topics of the conference are quite relevant. In fact, intermixing them further increases the relevance aspect because cloud and cybersecurity is something that, whether we like it or not, our nation is gonna face in the next couple of decades, if not now itself. If you see, ladies and gentlemen, last couple of decades have seen a phenomenal growth in the way in which digitization has happened. This was further exacerbated uh, in the COVID reign. The key part that worked out was that the classical modes in which we used to operate, it started changing. We used to work in more physical form, things moved more to the virtual form. We had security paradigms which were primarily parameter centric or parameter secured based systems. We moved to an aspect where the parameters and the boundaries evolved, it intermingled, it moved away to such an aspect that there is no parameter as of now. We worked on a scenario where the collaborative platforms migrated from mere video conferencing to joint workmanship onto the digital platforms, and then subsequently provisioning of this data across to the public system, of course in the business aspects also, but primarily in the public domain, again through web. But what was the key aspect that changed everything? And it was especially, I believe that two aspects have helped this country in digitization. One is definitely, the geo revolution, and you had internet almost even with every nook and corner in the society. The other one is COVID. Now, COVID essentially forced us to move out of our existing stringent thought processes where things were in control to a scenario which were more cohesive, more elaborative, much more intrinsic, and much more in depth, touching almost every aspect of society. And that changed things. One of the key aspects that was learned by the government was dependence on cloud services as well as digital services, of course, through cloud and so on. But these digital services, of course, the CoWIN app and the Aadhaar was already there. And there were a whole lot of other things that were there. But what changed? The things that changed was the application of technology and the scale at which this technology increased. Because right now, you are not talking about some people who were just using these digital services as just a mere, kind of a convenient tool, to an aspect where these digital services move to mandatory aspect onto the digital platform. This particular aspect was further exacerbated, especially in the way in which demonetization and other aspects came into the economy. And essentially, what you saw, India being the largest, digital transaction based country globally. If you see NPCI data, it's phenomenal. You don't see these kind of things even in most of the developed countries like US and so on. And that's phenomenally changed. So what has happened? We have changed as a society as a whole. Informationization of society is what has happened. And as this informationization is happening, one of the key challenges is the cybersecurity aspect of it, or the threats that are blooming into it. Let's have a look at what threats we are talking about. The threats range from non-state actors to state actors, and then of course there is a aspect called as quasi-state actors. If you convert them in the form of domains, and primarily from the orientation in which the data is coming, you move it from the low-lying part of cybercrime, which is of course affecting in huge numbers. You are moving into what is called as a very high level of cyber warfare activities, where you are, and including the cyber espionage, where you are looking into state actors primarily working at the behest of, with certain political intents in the mind, so as to extract out information, so as to disrupt your critical information infrastructure. And in between this, you have what is called as cyber terrorism, or I would rather use the word information enabled terrorism, where essentially the same digital media is being used by various non-state actors, by various terrorist organizations, so as to do their job. So that's the overall landscape. If you look into the cyber warfare aspect, you need to look into the aspect that things have moved to, as to not just extracting out information, or typically what we call as cyber espionage, probably your phones getting hacked, or probably your emails getting hacked, corporate espionage, and so on. But things have moved into what is called as a kinetic space, utilization of cyber threats so as to have physical effect. Why? Because most of our systems have now become cyber physical systems. You have physical systems that are directly connected with the cyber systems, or operational technologies directly connected to the cyber technologies, and that has what is called as a physical relevance. That has changed the paradigm. The new threats that are emerging into the current day scenario has moved. If you see in the cyber crime, of course, at the low lying, gone are the days when phishing or phone phishing was one of the very important talk of the town. Because many a times, if you see this informationization, people are becoming more and more aware. They know the fact that you need not to share your OTP with somebody pretending to be a phone phishing guy, saying that I am from a bank or something. They are not. But what has happened is the techniques in which the cyber criminals are now operating has also changed. So they are no longer depending upon the normal call centers and so on. You are moving into new set of threats. The most imminent of that is the ransomware, if you are talking about the corporate part. So typically, if you see the ransomware, and there are multiple incidents that happen. For example, Ames was the most recent one. Of course, recently the ICMR data breach, that was the COVID data and so on. That's another part. So what exactly the ransomware threats are doing into, most of the people, whenever they are extracting out information, typically the state actors, they utilize, or the criminal aspects, they take the data, they ask you like a normal ransom, please give us this much money. If you don't give us this much money, we'll release your data. If you don't agree to it, they'll release the data, they'll try to sell it out in the underground. If it doesn't work, they will send a ransomware which will encrypt out most of your digital storage information. And then another second tier of ransom happens, that give us money, else your systems will not work. And this particular aspect is not now case to case basis. If you see globally, the other day, we were at the ransomware summit in Washington. And what we were seeing, groups like Hive, groups like Logbit, they have changed the way in which things operate. Ransomware as a service. So there is one end that provides you a service. These are developers, these are the technical guys or the techies that create the ransomware, but they are not the ones who use the ransomware. These services are hired and utilized by cyber criminals. They actually do and operate upon the threat actors, and then the extortionist is a separate wing that operates upon, so as to extract out money. And this whole network beautifully runs. It's a very well-oiled system, much more coordinated, much more cooperative, and the results are there. Ransomware becoming one of the most important threats that we are facing. But if you look at the other important aspect, and the important part of the summit, is the cloud security. Now we are talking about digitization and informationization. One aspect I definitely want the audience to look into: the future. What is the future we are relying on? The fundamental tenets of cybersecurity relies on cryptography or confidentiality. Most of your classical crypto systems, if you see 5 years from now, the moment quantum computing comes into the play, they will be irrelevant, literally irrelevant. You have AES, you have triple DES, Rendell algorithm, RSA, and so on. Most of our BFSI sector, most of our transactions are happening on these classical crypto systems. But the moment we are moving into the quantum space, and trust me, it's not something that's going to happen 10 years from now. It's already happening. There are countries which already are into the quantum computing paradigms. Their systems are almost attuned to 128 qubit based systems. So what happens essentially, your classical crypto systems are rendered useless. Are we thinking about it or not? That's a question we need to think about. Are we thinking about, there are aspects such as what is called as PQC, or post quantum cryptography, or what we call as quantum resistant cryptography. That's something probably we need to think right now, because the time we need to migrate our systems, because that always happens. We are always caught behind time. So that's one aspect we need to look into. Another aspect, if from the cybersecurity point of view, and that's again the futuristic aspect, we are relying on AI phenomenally. If you see everyone, in fact, the starting talk itself, in the welcome address itself, the relevance of AI was being discussed about big data analytics and AI models, AI based systems, and so on. But when you are looking into AI, we need to, again, as a future, what we need to look into, and that is where India has, we should always capitalize the opportunities that are provided as the mind gap. In AI, the future opportunities are generative AI. But at the same time, the biggest threat to AI is the adversarial AI. Are we doing something about it? That's a question we need to ask as a decision makers, as a policy makers, that if we are talking about AI, what are the mechanisms through which the policy interventions that should be there, the technological interventions that should be there, in order to control and so as to ethicalize the generative AI? That's one aspect. And how to counter what is called as adversarial AI. And trust me, adversarial AI has serious implications in terms of the systems, because what we are doing right now in the jingo race of creating AI based system is that almost every system is getting into AI enabled mode. But if we are going into AI enabled mode, we need to understand what are the threats that will come. And these are the threats. I'm not talking something hypothetical. There are already adversarial AI based threat attack vectors that are existing right now. The most recent was probably fooling a facial recognition system. In fact, most of the facial recognition systems are primarily based on AI applications, some on machine learning and some on the deep learning aspects into it. But adversarial AI actually bypassed most of the facial recognition systems. That was one of the proof of the case. So this is just one of the aspect. But are we looking at these aspects? That's the question. That's the important question that we need to answer into. Now, moving from classical the fundamental tenets of cryptography to fundamental tenets of what we call as AI. Now, let's move to another fundamental tenet, and that's the computing, or the cloud computing, and of course the cloud. So, if cloud, the way in which everything is moving into the cloud, I'm really glad that one of the important thing that was spoken about was the DPDP bill. Now, DPDP bill, it changes the way in which we operate. Of course, most of the people that were compliant with the GDPR and so on, those compliances definitely add value to it. But the way in which fiduciaries are held liable for the data that they hold, that's another ball game. Have we worked our applications in terms of anonymization of data when it is at storage? That's a question we need to think into. What are our policies for anonymization? What are our policies for aggregation? What are our policies for the storage as well as dissemination? But most important, what we tend to forget, what are our policies or the liabilities in case of a data breach? That's a fundamental question that we need to address when we are talking about DPDP. And that's another aspect we need to look into. From technology point, we are talking about cloud. if we need to go in the future of technology of cloud, and I believe that again there is a whole lot of space where Indian startup ecosystem can work into it, of course, right from PQC, right from adversarial AI, right, or generative AI, right from these DPDP aspects and so on. The next aspect is the way in which cloud itself is evolving. you know we always, whenever we talk about cloud, and sometimes, many times, whenever I talk to various experts in the cloud space, the things always revolve around the discussions around Kubernetes and Dockers, and that's it. That's the epitome of that discussion, and the discussion ends. But are we really looking into how the cloud as a service is moving out? You are working on new technologies called as unikernel. How many of us are even working, leave alone have heard of unikernels? And that's the future of cloud. These are the things that we need to look into. Whenever summits like these happen, it always tend us to look into the aspects that we need to prepare for the future. We need to have policies and plans in order to be ready, right from the technology space to address to the future, right from the policy space to address to the future, and most importantly, creation of an ecosystem that is valid, that is robust, and that is energetic enough that it churns out these startups, which are the fundamental building block of any society. Cyberspace is evolving. There are two aspects, that is the threats, but I also look at the fact that every threat is an opportunity. The only way is how we see at those threats, because these threats emanate out of the gaps, and each gap is an opportunity to be filled. Whether we look into the opportunity aspect of it or whether we crib about the threat, that is something that I leave to you all. It was indeed a pleasure talking to you all, but definitely as a decision makers, as future technologists, as the future companies that are there, we need to look into these particular next generation technologies. Digitization is happening. Cloud and all these technologies are the means to it. They are the means right now, and they will evolve further. But the way in which we embrace this technology, that's one thing that would define how we're going to be taking this country. We are already crossed the 4 trillion mark. Very soon, the next year, I'm pretty sure we will reach the 5 trillion goal that would be there. But one of the key drivers for it is going to be the digital space. And that's where I request you all, let's join hands. Let's look into these opportunities, these gaps. Please don't think them to be the threats. If I'm talking about your classical crypto system becoming invalid in the quantum era, look it as an opportunity. You have to create what is called as quantum resistant cryptography. So what does that provide you? That provide you a huge market of classical AES or RSA based crypto system based security systems that are there. That provides you a new opportunity. Look into the aspects of that aspect, and definitely, the way in which we perceive things in the future, they always provide us opportunities to work on. Thank you very much. It was indeed a pleasure talking to you all. Jai Hind.
This round of applause actually indicates how informative it was and how enlightening it was for all of us. Your speech, you talked about various aspects of the technology, futuristic technology, adversarial AI, or cloud quantum ecosystem, and how to see the gaps or the challenges and opportunity to take us to the next level and transform ourselves in the digital world. Thank you so much, Mr. Amit Sharma, for your insights.